Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma. Let's get started. Chinese companies are under the lens in India. First, Xiaomi was raided. Now, Vivo is facing investigation. Yesterday, India's Enforcement Directorate raided 44 properties belonging to Vivo. Back in December, the Income Tax Department had also knocked on the doors of these companies. The focus is on the money. How do Chinese companies make money in India? Who profits from the Indian market? And where does the money end up? Chinese investments are also facing scrutiny. India has more than 380 investment proposals from China. So far, only 80 have been cleared. What does that tell you? Chinese investments are welcome in India, but they'll have to play by the rules in India. Beijing does not like this scrutiny. On Gravitas tonight, we'll tell you why. First, a quick history lesson. That's the story of India-China relations. A lot of ups, downs and milestones. Even during the best of times, things were never perfect. Perhaps it's the curse of geography. Two proud and ancient civilizations right next to each other. Tempers were bound to flare. Today, this rivalry has moved to new theatres, like the economy. Since the clashes in Galwan, India has cracked down on Chinese businesses. More than 200 apps were banned in the year 2020, and now Chinese companies are under the scanner. Let me tell you what happened on Tuesday. India's Enforcement Directorate, ED, raided offices of Chinese phone maker Vivo. It was a nationwide sweep. Almost 44 offices across the country were searched. Raids were reported in Delhi, in Uttar Pradesh, in Meghalaya, Maharashtra and West Bengal. What are the charges against Vivo? There are two of them. One is money laundering and two, forgery of identity papers. The company has responded to these charges. Let me tell you what a spokesperson said, and I'm quoting, Vivo India is cooperating with the authorities to provide them with all required information. As a responsible corporate, we are committed to being fully compliant with laws in India. Now, this could be a huge blow for Vivo. They make up 15% of India's smartphone market. Their total revenue is more than 25,000 crore rupees. And Vivo is not alone. Other Chinese phone makers are also on India's radar. Let me show you the timeline. In December last year, 3 companies were raided: Xiaomi, Oppo and Vivo. They were accused of evading taxes worth 6,500 crore rupees, 6,500 crore. That's more than $820 million. In February this year, Huawei was raided. They too were manipulating their books to evade taxes. And in April, Xiaomi was raided again. Assets worth $700 million were seized by the Enforcement Directorate of India. The charges funneling money back to China. Some firms are not even able to enter the Indian market, like Great Wall Motors. They're the biggest SUV makers in China. In 2020, they announced plans to enter India. Their cars were showcased at the Auto Expo. They even signed a deal to take over General Motors' Maharashtra plant. And there was big money involved, almost $1 billion. Yet the plan never took off. Great Wall has abandoned their India ambitions. They have not said why, but reports hint at regulatory roadblocks. The operation in Maharashtra did not get a green light from the authorities, so Great Wall is moving to Brazil. What does China say about all of this? Their state media is twisting the narrative. They're making it seem like India is an obstructionist market. Let me show you a report in the Global Times. This is what it says. India does not want Chinese-funded enterprises to enter important industries such as automobiles. Under India's current investment approval system, it is unrealistic for Chinese-funded companies to hope to enter relevant industries. How tables turn. A communist country is lecturing India on free market. Well, irony aside, is there any truth to this claim? I'll show you a report, and then you can decide for yourself. In the last 2 years, India has approved 80 investment applications from China, 80, and we're talking about FDI, foreign direct investment, 80 applications cleared. After the clashes in Galwan, India tweaked the FDI rules. Now there is a separate regime for neighbours. If you share a land border with India, you will need special clearance. So China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, all these countries will need special government clearance for FDI. And since then, India has received proposals from 382 Chinese firms. How many of them got cleared? Around 80. Indian officials are following a strict vetting process. For example, minority stakes get easy clearance, but acquisitions not so much, because that involves complete ownership by a Chinese firm. Same with digital assets. India is wary of letting China invest in Indian digital enterprises, but physical assets get easy clearance. We're talking about factories or shops. Again, the reason is quite clear. Physical assets are easier to target if things go south, but digital assets are hard to track and harder to seize. So India's policy is not based on obstructionism, it is based on national security and interest. We know what happens when Chinese companies enter foreign markets. They take over key industries, they displace local competitors, not to mention dabble in communist espionage. So India is taking extra care while vetting Chinese businesses. And Beijing, of all people, should understand this. This is a country that accuses even cars of spying. In China, you cannot park a Tesla car near a government building. Guess why? Because the Communist Party fears the car will eavesdrop. India's approach is not that extreme. It is welcoming Chinese investments as long as the books are in order. If the plan is to launder money or funnel forex to China, then authorities will crack down. It's less about hurting Chinese businesses and more about protecting Indian markets, something communists should love, at least on paper. Having said that, India needs to strike a careful balance. Yes, scrutiny is necessary. At the same time, you cannot hold back investments because the global economy is on a knife edge. The months ahead could be tough. Experts are predicting what they call a procession of recessions. Major economies are staring at a recession. The United States, the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Canada, and the Eurozone. All of them. The Eurozone, by the way, is a group of 19 countries which accept the euro as the primary currency. Now, all these economies could dip into recession within the next year. And we are no longer talking about probabilities. We are talking about how bad this recession could be. Will it be worse than 2008? Tonight on Gravitas, we'll discuss. First of all, let's tell you there are three main causes of a recession. Number one is an overheated economy. Number two, asset bubbles. And number three, black swan events. These three factors can cause a recession, and all three of them are at play right now. Let me explain. First is an overheated economy. When does an economy overheat? When there's an imbalance between demand and supply. And that's exactly what is happening right now. The demand is high and the supply is struggling to catch up. Consider these recent headlines. The war in Ukraine triggered a global food shortage. Global oil demand set to rise to a new high in 2023. Global supply chain crisis fuels push to local manufacturing. Labor unrest disrupts supply chains from sky to sea. All of these headlines are saying the exact same thing. The demand for goods is high, the supply is short. And the result is rising prices. In other words, inflation. We've told you this before. How bad is the situation? I have some more data for you. 44 countries have advanced economies in the world. In 37 countries, inflation rates have doubled. High inflation is a sign of an overheating economy, so central banks are now trying to tame inflation. How? By rising interest rates. It might take a while for those measures to work, if they work, that is. The second factor that leads to recession is asset bubbles. How do they work? Say something was overpriced earlier for whatever reasons. It was a bubble. And suddenly the prices fall, the bubble bursts. This price correction can cause a recession. And it's happening as we speak. During the pandemic, stock prices of several companies soared. Markets were on a high. This created a bubble, and that bubble has burst. Look at the recent mass sell-off in markets. Do you know how much investors have lost? $11 trillion till the month of May this year. 11 trillion. This is the worst losing streak for global stocks since 2008. That was the last global financial crisis, 2008. So how did global markets fare today? Thankfully, today was better. Most exchanges closed in green. India's Nifty and Sensex made gains. They were up by more than 1%. But there's no guarantee it will remain the same, because more bubbles could burst. One of them is the debt bubble. Global debt has reached a staggering $305 trillion. This includes all kinds of debt in the world. Household, private companies, governments, all of them owe a whopping $305 trillion. Let's put that number into perspective. Global debt was just $83 trillion in the year 2000. 2022, it's $305 trillion. That's almost 4 times more. This debt is now 355% of the global GDP, and this is unsustainable. Some of the debt is bound to fail, and when that happens, it could lead to a slowdown. The third factor we mentioned is black swan events. What are these? Basically, rare, unpredictable events that impact the whole world, like the Wuhan virus pandemic and Russia's war on Ukraine. Events like these accelerate the collapse of economies. The pandemic derailed the global economy. The war in Ukraine has dealt it a body blow. It is linked to supply shortages and inflation. The war is being fought in Ukraine, but its impact is being felt by the whole world. And it will get worse before it gets better. And here's why I say that. Businesses and global supply chains are being crippled. There are labor strikes in many countries. It began with the United Kingdom. From railway to postal workers and teachers, they all announced strikes. In Germany, 8,000 dock workers went on a strike last week. In France, workers have threatened to shut down a refinery. There were protests in South Korea too. Last month, truckers went on an 8-day strike. And all of them have the same demand. Better wages, that's what they want. You see, recessions don't just impact a country's economy, they also cause social unrest. And for any government, an angry population is the worst case scenario. The way things are going, they should brace for impact. Well, processions come and processions go. Markets slide, markets rise. But there's someone who stays through all of it. Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Britain. For more than a year now, there's been buzz that Johnson may be out of office any time. Every day is like his last day. But Johnson's political career is like the cat with 9 lives. It has survived the party gate, multiple lies, a no-confidence vote, and now Johnson faces a new leadership challenge, an uprising in his own cabinet. 2 key ministers have resigned, Rishi Sunak, the finance minister, and Sajid Javid, the health minister. Some junior ministers have put in their papers too, including the Financial Services Minister, the Junior Home Minister, a Junior Environment Minister, Minister for Children and Families, Minister of State for School, several Parliament private secretaries. All in all, at least 31 government ministers and aides have quit in the last 24 hours in London. They want Boris Johnson to follow suit and quit. Reports say even Michael Gove has asked Johnson to go. Who is Gove? He is one of the most senior ministers in the British government. But does the Prime Minister plan to resign?
That is exactly the moment that you'd expect a government to continue with its work, not to walk away, Mr. Speaker, and to get on with our job.
In short, I'm not going anywhere. But why did the cabinet ministers go? Sajid Javid and Rishi Sunak say they've lost faith in Johnson's leadership. Their resignation comes on the heels of the Chris Pincher scandal. Pincher was the deputy chief whip, also an alleged sex offender. Johnson knew about his behavior. He once joked, A pincher by name is a pincher by nature. So it became problematic when Johnson promoted the man despite his nature. He made a predator more powerful. 10 Downing Street tried to defend the appointment. It lied. It did a couple of about turns, but neither helped. In his resignation letter, Rishi Sunak said there's a mismatch between his approach and that of Johnson. The Prime Minister is unaffected, though. He found a replacement, someone who agrees with Johnson's approach.
With the benefit of hindsight, he made a mistake to appoint Chris Pincher to the role of Deputy Chief. And he's right to apologise. We make decisions, you know this, John, at warp speed, as cabinet ministers, as Chancellor, as a Prime Minister.
This is Nadeem Zahawi. He's a refugee from Iraq. You must have heard about the polling company YouGov. Zahawi co-founded it. He's a businessman. Earlier he was the education minister. Now he's also the finance minister. Also, Zahawi is right. Leaders do make mistakes. But how many survive so many mistakes? An economic chaos, and Sri Lanka's Mahinda Rajapaksa had to step down. The Panama Papers leak and Iceland's Sigmund Durgung Logsson was out. Johnson's lockdown party photos were leaked. He's still in office. Johnson laughed off the Wuhan virus. He's still in office. He lied about the party gate, and Johnson is still in number 10 Downing Street. The morning papers once again say Johnson will not be there for too long. One headline declared that Johnson is hanging by a thread. Another called the curtains on Johnson's prime ministerial ship. Take a look at this front page. Going, going, gone. Well, we've all asked this question repeatedly in the last 1 year. There is speculation, though, that some Tories are once again trying to unseat the Prime Minister. They could also be trying to change party rules. Current rules do not allow for 2 votes of no confidence within a year. Remember, Johnson faced a vote in June. He survived it. So the next one can only happen next year in mid-2023. Tory backbenchers don't want to wait that long. Earlier this evening, some of them joined the opposition in grilling Boris Johnson.
A government minister was accused of sexually assaulting a young man.
I abhor bullying and abuse of power anywhere.
Pincher by name, pincher by nature.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to trivialise what happened.
Mr. Speaker, isn't this the first recorded case of the sinking ships fleeing the rat?
So that is the Prime Minister and the political leaders. Let's talk about the people of Britain. What do they want? Well, many want Johnson out, but most are amused that he's survived this long.
Who knows? How's he survived this long?
He should leave. He should have left a long time ago.
But yeah, I'm just surprised he's still there.
I think he should stay because I think he's done an amazing job over Brexit, COVID, and doing very well over Ukraine.
Johnson will agree with this man, I think. For as long as he can, stay he will. Our next story is about Tesla, one of the most valuable car companies in the world. But 2022 is turning out to be a nightmare for Tesla. First, the Wuhan virus lockdowns in China disrupted its supply chains. Now, Tesla has lost the tag of the world's largest electric car maker. Its quarterly sales have dropped abysmally this year. The company sold just 39,000 units in the month of April. What explains the decline? Why have Tesla sales dropped? And which company has seized its crown? Here's a report.
It is one of the world's most valuable car companies. Undisputed Wall Street darling, worth more than $1 trillion for the longest time. It was also the world's biggest electric car maker. In 2020, it sold 500,000 units. In 2021, it sold over 900,000 units. It's 2022 and the sales have dropped abysmally. Tesla has sold just 255,000 units in Q2. This is an 18% drop from EV sales in the first quarter. It has reduced Tesla's share in global EV sales to 10%. To put it simply, Tesla is no longer the world's biggest EV producer. market analysts say Tesla's luster has dimmed. It's no longer on the top spot. The question is why? The answer is China. China is Tesla's biggest market. It accounts for 40% of Tesla's sales. But the Wuhan virus lockdowns in China have stung the company's growth. They've disrupted production and upended supply chains. In Shanghai, a Tesla plant remained shut for 3 weeks. The factory shipped 60,000 cars a month. Last month, it delivered only 1,500 vehicles. This triggered a domino effect. In Tesla facilities in Texas and Germany also reported supply chain snarls. All of these issues combined have crimped Tesla's profits, dethroned it from the top spot. So which company has seized Tesla's crown? BYD, a Chinese automobile maker backed by Warren Buffett. In the first 6 months of 2022, this company sold 641,000 units, an increase of 300% from last year. But there's a big catch. Not all these vehicles were fully electric. Over 323,000 of them were battery electric vehicles. The remaining 317,000 were plug-in hybrids. But under China's sales rules, all these vehicles are counted as electric vehicles, which probably explains why BYD is on the top spot. This doesn't change the fact that Tesla is on the back foot. It's performing lower than expectations and losing billions of dollars in the process. Perhaps Tesla's CEO needs some time off. Twitter. Bureau Report. WION. World is One.
Speaking of Twitter, the company has filed a case against the government of India. I know it seems like a deja vu. Twitter spent most of last year fighting Indian regulators. So what are they fighting this time? The same thing, oversight. Twitter says there's too much of it. The government says it is necessary for public order. So the company is moving the courts. It wants a judicial review of the government's powers. We'll get to that in a bit. First, the controversy. Can the government of India take down social media content? Well, not directly, but they can ask companies to do it. For example, some Twitter user is spreading fake news on the Wuhan virus or trying to trigger communal hatred. In such situations, the government can interfere. The IT laws permit it. So what's the problem here? Twitter claims the government is interfering way too much. They say some of the requests are politically motivated, and this back and forth has been going on for months. Twitter accepted some requests. They also rejected some. But the tipping point came last month. The Indian government served multiple notices to Twitter, either take down content or lose your legal immunity. You see, right now, Twitter is a social media intermediary, sort of like a middleman, which means they are free from legal cases. If the government withdraws that immunity, Twitter could be in serious trouble. They will be answerable for every fake tweet, every bit of hateful content, and every offensive post. It will be Twitter's responsibility. And that's one reason why Twitter complied earlier. Another reason is money. India is home to 24 million Twitter users, and chances are that number will keep rising. So Twitter wanted to stay in the good books. They wanted to carry on making money in India, until this week at least. This week, they decided to sue the government of India. The lawsuit has been filed in the Karnataka High Court, but the hearing date is yet to be set. How is the government reacting to this lawsuit? Let me tell you what the junior IT minister said, and I'm quoting, "In India, all, including foreign internet intermediaries or platforms, have the right to court and judicial review. But equally, all intermediaries or platforms operating here have unambiguous obligation to comply with our laws and rules." So both sides are ready for the fight. It is now up to the judiciary to resolve this. Having said that, could this have been handled better? Because let's face it, the headlines do not look good. Twitter is one of the largest social media companies in the world, and India is the largest democracy in the world. They should be working in tandem, not in opposition. And both sides must take responsibility for this. Twitter has traditionally refused oversight. They believe their creator, editor, and publisher. In the US, this may not be a problem. Twitter's CEO is a regular guest at congressional hearings. US lawmakers grill them almost every quarter. But that's not the case in India. Here, Twitter refuses all kinds of oversight. Their argument? Free speech. And using that argument, Twitter permitted all kinds of content, Khalistani tweets during the farmers' protest, communal tweets during the Delhi riots. So naturally, the government had to step in. But the question is, did they step in too far? In 2021, the government asked Twitter to take down 85 accounts. Some of these were activists, some were journalists. So this time, it was Twitter's turn to push back. They refused to comply with some requests. Which brings us to present day, a full-blown legal battle. We don't know which way this lawsuit will go, but one thing is for sure. India needs a transparent system to control social media, and the system must include multiple stakeholders, the government, yes, the judiciary, the civil society, and also the company itself. Until then, such legal battles will keep popping up. Our next story is from Pakistan. It's in the throes of a power crisis. There's a severe scarcity of fuel, a crippling shortage of electricity. Let me show you some figures. As of the 5th of July, Pakistan's total power requirement was 29,000 megawatts. How much are they generating? 21,000. Way less than the national demand. And this has led to frequent power cuts, outages of up to 16 hours. What explains the shortages and outages? Mismanagement, inefficiency, power theft, and in some cases, politically motivated appointments in power utilities. And all of this is according to Pakistan's own assessment. They have figured out the problem. They've acknowledged the problem. But they're not doing very much to solve the problem. The question is why? What is the Pakistan government busy doing? Mending ties with China, ensuring power supply to Chinese projects as the rest of the nation suffers in scorching heat. Reports say in the month of June, Pakistan's Prime Minister visited the Gwadar port twice, and this is unusual. Typically, Pakistani leaders make such visits once or twice a year. But Sharif made 2 trips in 1 month. What was the urgency? The fear of a Chinese scolding. You see, Gwadar is an integral part of the BRI, the Predatory Belt and Road Initiative. Under this initiative, Beijing is building a host of things in Gwadar, an expressway, an airport, a vocational institute, to name a few. But most of these projects have been stalled because of the ongoing power crisis in Pakistan. There's no sustainable supply of electricity and frequent power fluctuations. So the aim of Prime Minister Sharif's visit was to put an end to these problems. He apparently directed his officials to redirect power supply to Gwadar and jumpstart the sputtered projects. Talk about priorities. Chinese projects get power. The people of Pakistan suffer in darkness. What about the politicians of Pakistan? How are they being treated? With the same kind of contempt, they say, especially the ones from the PTI, the erstwhile rulers of Pakistan. They're being hunted like geese. And this is not an exaggeration. In the last 2 months, scores of PTI leaders have been detained by Pakistani authorities. The alleged witch hunt started in the month of May, immediately after the Azadi March, the one that Imran Khan led. So in May, the Pakistan government conducted more than 1,100 raids and arrested more than 400 PTI leaders. On the 1st of June, 1,000 more were marked for preventive arrests. And these were activists and financiers of the PTI. On the 10th of June, arrest warrants were issued against 17 PTI leaders. Some of them happened to be close aides of Imran Khan. And it's not just PTI members. Anyone close to the former Prime Minister or someone speaking against his ouster is being taken to task. Case in point, Imran Riaz, a prominent journalist who also happens to be an ardent supporter of Imran Khan. He has been charged with treason and put behind bars. The spate of arrests has rattled Imran Khan. He has issued a warning to the PMLN. He says if this harassment does not stop, he will reveal everything. That's what he said, reveal everything. And by everything, he means the details of the alleged conspiracy through which he was toppled from power. You have to listen to this.
मुझे तो सब पता है कि किसने क्या किया। मैं सिर्फ और सिर्फ अपनी कौम के लिए कि मैं चाहता हूं मेरे मुल्क को नुकसान ना पहुंचे, मैं चुप करके बैठा हूं। मैं कोई बात नहीं करता क्योंकि मुझे पता है किस तरह ये सारी साजिश हुई थी और कौन-कौन मुलव्वस है। मैंने एक टेप भी एक वीडियो बनाई हुई है, महफूज जगह पे रखी है कि अगर मुझे कुछ होता है तो वो भी पब्लिक को पता चलेगा।
You heard that. I will reveal everything, he says. The problem is he may not have very much to reveal. In the month of March, right before he was ousted, Imran Khan claimed to have a letter apparently sent to him by US officials. And he said this letter had details of the foreign conspiracy that led to his ouster. When asked to make the letter public, he went quiet. 3 months on, he claims to have a videotape with details of the very same conspiracy. So first a letter, now a video, but none has been shared with the world. So is this another empty threat? It's hard to say, but going by his record, Imran Khan has a habit of throwing dead balls after selling them off as bouncers. This could be another one. We'll keep track for you. For the moment, we head to Iran, which is giving headaches to world powers. The United States has sounded an alarm. It says Iran can make a nuclear bomb. It's ready to make a nuclear bomb. That's the assessment of this man, Robert Malley. He serves as the U.S. Special Envoy for Iran. And recently he gave an interview. He was talking about Iran's uranium stockpile. I have that statement with me. This is what Robert Malley said. And I'm quoting, "It would take them a matter of weeks to build a bomb. This would be something that the US government would know, we would see, and to which we would react quite forcefully, as you can imagine." Weeks to make a bomb, he says. We cannot verify this assessment, but we can tell you that Tehran has been rapidly growing its uranium stockpile, enriching uranium, and it has every incentive to pursue weapons. The nuclear deal that was supposed to stop Tehran from building a nuclear weapon is on life support. Recently, American and Iranian officials were in Qatar. European officials were there too. For more than a year now, the Europeans have been acting as intermediaries. Europe made a fresh attempt to restore the nuclear deal. It called American and Iranian diplomats for talks to Doha. They tried to secure a deal, but there was no breakthrough. And the US is blaming Iran for this.
Iran has consistently introduced extraneous demands, demands that or issues that go beyond the four walls of the JCPOA. The JCPOA is about one thing, it's about one thing only, and that's Iran's nuclear program. To introduce anything that goes beyond the narrow confines of the JCPOA suggests a lack of seriousness, suggests a lack of commitment. And that, unfortunately, is what the team saw once again in Doha.
We were ready, but Iran did not take the deal. That is what Washington is saying, and Iran contests that version. Listen to their foreign minister.
Despite some media claims from the American side, we have not raised any demands outside of the nuclear deal. Our demands are completely within the bounds of the 2015 agreement.
Our demands are justified. That's what Iran says. What are these demands? Well, they've not shared them with the public. But in the past, Iran has demanded guarantees from the US. Number one, the US will not torpedo the nuclear deal again. They'll not kill it again. Number two, the US will not violate its obligations. And number three, Iran will not be sanctioned again under any other pretext. So Iran wants an ironclad deal this time, something that guarantees that the US will not back out again. And to get it, Tehran has the right leverage, the uranium stockpiles. So if it wants, it can push for a favorable pact. Iran's arch-rival Israel does not want that to happen. Their interim Prime Minister Yair Lapid was in France. He met with French President Emmanuel Macron. Israel remains opposed to the nuclear deal. It does not want this pact to be revived. But if this deal goes through, Israel wants Iran to be subjected to tougher terms, which is why Lapid traveled all the way to France. He wants President Macron on his side.
It is important our voice be heard at this time against this dangerous deal, against the organization and the nuclearization of Iran on this issue. I will discuss this with my friend, President Macron.
Well, what did Macron say? Did Lapid succeed in his mission? He did not. The French president still supports the nuclear deal. He believes there is no alternative to dialogue.
I wish to again reiterate our desire to succeed as soon as possible with the negotiations on a return to the aspect of the Iran deal. We agree with Israel that this deal will not be enough to contain the destabilizing activities of Iran. But more than ever, I remain convinced that an Iran that is on the nuclear threshold could conduct even more dangerous activities. And so we have to defend this deal, take into account security interests of our friends in the region, primarily Israel, and top this off with stronger negotiations of ballistic and regional activities.
Et le compléter par des négociations.
So Israel will have to live with the pact. But the bigger question is, will a deal even happen? So far, the efforts of the West, especially the United States, have been fruitless. With each failed attempt, the space to negotiate is shrinking. Europe's top diplomats are now desperate. Josep Borrell spoke to the Iranian foreign minister, and here's what he said afterwards. If we want to conclude an agreement, decisions are needed now. And there are indications that all sides could meet for a dialogue again. Qatar is pushing for this meeting. Their foreign minister visited Tehran today. He met with the leadership of Iran. Qatar says Iran is committed to keeping the pact alive. So do the Western powers share that commitment is the question. We'll have to wait and see. And here's something else that the West loves discussing. India's foreign policy. Why is India neutral? Why is India not trying to end the war in Ukraine? Such questions betray a lack of understanding about India's history, about India's foreign policy goals. Tuesday was a timely reminder to those. Let me introduce you to Lieutenant General Mohan Subramanian. He has been appointed as the commander of UN peacekeeping forces in South Sudan. Peacekeepers are basically a multinational security force. They're deployed by the United Nations to contain fighting in conflict zones. This one was established back in the year 2011. The same year that South Sudan became an independent country. It was made up of around 12,000 soldiers. Their mission: to prevent conflict, to consolidate peace-building measures, and to rebuild the economy. India has contributed 2,300 soldiers and 30 police officers to this mission. The previous force commander was also an Indian, Lieutenant General Shailesh Tinaikar. He is being succeeded by Lieutenant General Mohan Subramanian. Let's take a brief look at his career. He was commissioned in the Corps of Army Air Defence in 1986. He has served as a general commanding officer in central India. There he was in charge of logistics and operations. Before that, he served as the Additional Director General for Procurement and Equipment Management at the Ministry of Defence. He was also a defence attaché to Vietnam, Cambodia and Laos. In fact, this is not his first UN assignment. He was a staff officer with the Sierra Leone mission in the year 2000. And now he's commanding a peacekeeping force. Not just any force, the South Sudan mission is the largest peacekeeping mission in the world. So this appointment is a validation of India's contributions and commitment. Most people tend to overlook peacekeepers. We talk about the army, we talk about border security, but we never talk about peacekeepers. Just think about it. These people are deployed in foreign lands. They're risking their lives, not for their homeland, but for other countries. And that takes a lot of commitment, a lot of moral fiber. And Indian soldiers have consistently done it. Let me show you some numbers. Indian soldiers are currently deployed with 14 UN missions, 14. Around 5,400 of them. They're not serving under the Indian flag. They're serving under the UN flag. And where are they deployed? In the Democratic Republic of Congo, in Lebanon, South Sudan, Syria, the Golan Heights, Western Sahara, in Cyprus. Indian soldiers are deployed as peacekeepers in all of these places. Some of them have emerged as leaders. Until now, India has provided 15 force commanders, 2 military advisors, 1 deputy military advisor, 2 division commanders, and 8 deputy division commanders. Lieutenant General Mohan Subramanian is now part of that list. He is part of India's rich legacy at the United Nations, not of squabbling in the Security Council, not of gamesmanship, but of positive contributions. And in this journey, India has lost some soldiers too, including in South Sudan. In 2013, a UN convoy was ambushed by rebels. 5 Indian peacekeepers were killed that day. Put together, more than 3,700 UN peacekeepers have died since 1948. And how many from India? 163, the highest for any country in the UN peacekeeping force. In fact, the developing world has always done the heavy lifting. Time for more data. Bangladesh is the #1 contributor to peacekeeping missions. They deploy more than 6,300 soldiers. Nepal is second, India is third, Rwanda is fourth, and Ethiopia is fifth. Where do the so-called superpowers rank? Not even in the picture. The developed countries prefer spending over deploying. 27% of peacekeeping funds come from the US. 15% from China, 8% from Japan, and 14% from European Union countries. But even that funding is drying up. America's spending on peacekeeping has fallen 40% since 2016. Compare that to their defense budget. Almost $800 billion in 2021. They can fund NATO, they can provide arms to Ukraine, but they cannot fund peacekeeping. So India must celebrate Tuesday's appointment. It must also use this opportunity. Peacekeeping is crucial to conflict zones around the world. They do not just contain wars. They also help the local economy flourish. India's history of peacekeeping gives it the moral authority to lead this campaign, to once again put peacekeeping at the center of United Nations programs. And now we come to space programs. The US and China are racing to bring back samples of the red planet. Both are trying to do what no country has ever done, which is to blast off a rocket from the surface of another planet. NASA says it will be able to get a parcel delivered from Mars by 2033. China claims it will do the same 2 years before NASA. Here's a report.
I came, I saw, I conquered. These were Julius Caesar's words following his victory in the Battle of Zela. Caesar was lucky. He was fighting in 47 BC because battles these days are too complicated to sum up in 3 words. Just look at the space battle. First, countries raced to send their missions to Mars. Now, they are scratching their heads over the next phase. You all know Perseverance. The NASA rover landed in Mars in February 2021. Ever since, it has been roaming around, surveying and collecting samples. Perseverance has done its job. It went, it saw. But how will it send back what it found, or as Caesar would say, conquered? There are blast rocks, sediment, and few other samples. You can't just ship them to Earth, can you? NASA has a plan, in fact a 3-part plan. The first one looks like this. This is the Mars Ascent Vehicle, or MAV. You can call it a mini rocket. It is less than 10 feet tall and about 1.5 feet in diameter. MAV is being developed by US aerospace giant Lockheed Martin. Then there is a sample retrieval lander. It is being developed by NASA. Part 3 of the plan is a fetch rover. The European Space Agency is making it. Now all 3, MAV, the sample retrieval lander and the fetch rover, will be sent to Mars. MAV and retrieval lander will travel together. Fetch will be flying solo. But they will all land in the same spot, hopefully near or in Jezero crater. Because that's where Perseverance is doing all the seeing and collecting. On landing, the fetch rover will get to action. It will collect the samples from Perseverance and bring them to the MAV. The rocket will then blast off for Earth. An Earth return orbiter will be waiting at the Martian orbit. It will grab the samples from MAV and eject them towards Earth. The sample-filled container will travel in high speed and land in Utah. The sample-filled container will travel in high speed and land in the Utah desert in 2033. That's a decade from now. And that sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie. For the first time ever, a rocket will be blasting off from another planet. Did we mention the sample container will be landing without a parachute? It will be one of those once-in-a-lifetime sights, a parcel from Mars. Who would have imagined? Now, China wants to outsmart West in these feat. Beijing too has its own rover in Mars. It's called Zhurong. The Chinese rover landed on Mars in 2021. So far, it's done some drilling and sample collecting. China claims the samples will be lifted from Mars in late 2028. It will touch down on Earth in July 2031. That's a 3-year journey and an arrival 2 years ahead of NASA and European Space Agency. It seems like the battle for space just got more interesting.
And now let's take a look at what else is making news across the world. This is Gravitas Global Headlines.
Amid intensifying Russian airstrikes in the Donetsk region, the governor of the Donetsk Regional Administration urged citizens to evacuate the region. Meanwhile, Russian forces have been targeting the cities of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. A strike by railway workers demanding higher pay amid a cost of living crisis interrupts train services in France. Regional services in the Paris region experience disruptions. The man accused of opening fire with a rifle from a rooftop onto a crowd of people watching a July 4th parade near Chicago was charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder. Britain's antitrust watchdog starts an investigation into Amazon.com on concerns over the US tech giant's practices affecting sellers on its UK marketplace.
And that is a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas images. Thanks very much for watching.